do you want to wait? Okay.
So Frankie, is Christine Brennan put like a restraining order on you yet?
I still don't think she knows who I
I
am.
sent your article to her editor. Your Substack. All right, so there's going to be a little bit of an echo in the room, so I'll try and speak slowly so it doesn't sound so off. My name is Ennis, and I'm the moderator of today's panel. I'm very glad to introduce three wonderful people, two of whom are journalists, one of whom is a journalist and an athlete, and we represent all different spectrums of trans non-binary existence. I myself am a transgender woman. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'd like to each of you introduce yourself with your pronouns and tell us a little bit about you.
Actually, I think we should start with the people who are joining us virtually today.
Well, I'm the moderator, so I've decided I'm going to start with the people who are joining us virtually. Sadie, would you go first, please? Tell us your pronouns and a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm Sadie Schreiner. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a track athlete at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and I'm a two-time All-American.
Thank you. Round of applause. And the people who you can't see, there are at least three people in the room, I promise. Frankie, please introduce yourself and your pronouns.
Hi, my name is Frankie Della Creta. My pronouns are they, them. I am a journalist and my work focuses on the intersection of sports and gender. So I have been writing about, transgender inclusion in sport for many years now. And because this is PFLAG, I will add that I also have a trans child as well. And that's very important to me.
Welcome to the family. I do too. Isn't it great? The one thing I didn't want for my kids was to do what we're doing. But I'm so happy for both of your kid and mine. Also, you didn't mention it, but you're also the author of a book, Hail Mary, The Rise and Fall of the National Women's Football League, called by the LA Times one of the 10 sports books we loved.
Yes, I also am that. Thank you.
And then there's this one.
Oh, by the way, if you haven't read Hail Mary, go get it. Go get it. It's an excellent book. And I'm not just saying as a fellow journalist, I'm also saying as an athlete. My name is Karleigh Webb. My pronouns are she, her. I am a writer contributor to outsports.com. I'm now celebrating my 32nd year in this crazy mixed up business of sports journalism.
Holy shit, you're old.
You're older.
I am.
But also, in addition, like I said, among my assignments, I've been a local reporter. I've been a network level producer for sports television, and I'm also when I'm not being a reporter, I'm also an athlete. I'm a running back, a defensive end, and linebacker for the Connecticut Ambush of the Women's Football Alliance. And this past season, I was a second team Women's Football Alliance All-American.
He's also a runner, a cyclist, and a great writer. And really great.
Thank you. Checks in the mail.
I'm still waiting. I want to start with a question that goes right to Frankie, because Frankie has been writing about an incident that you probably have been hearing about. The Connecticut Sun are in the playoffs. And when Frankie and their partner went to see the Connecticut Sun at Mohegan Sun Arena, it was not the kind of experience that they've had before. Matter of fact, it was a frightening experience. Frankie, would you tell us a little bit about what it was like to watch the Sun when the Indiana Fever came to play?
Yeah, so I mean, I think for context for folks who aren't super familiar with the WNBA, one of the reasons that I started covering it 6 seasons ago was I transitioned from men's sports to women's sports in part because of the WNBA. When I went to my first WNBA game, I'd never seen so many queer people and so many people just like having a really nice time, and it was the most positive sporting experience I had ever had, and it is a big reason why I decided to switch to covering the league, which I have been doing, like I said, for at least 6 seasons now. And my partner and I we're both trans, and we went to the playoff game this year against the Fever, and I wasn't credentialed as media, so I was very excited to actually like just be a fan at the game. And it was a wildly different environment than I had personally ever encountered. And the big difference this season is there's a lot more viewership, there's a lot more eyes on the league, and that is in part to Caitlin Clark entering the league from college. A lot of people have called this the Caitlin Clark effect. The impact of that has been like a lot more new fans, but it's a lot of people who are new to the league and not necessarily familiar with the culture of, the WNBA. And so that was really evident at this game. Not only were there people, people who were blatantly being, racist towards Sun players. There was a woman in like essentially blackface as well, with like a caricature of fake nails that was, aimed at one of the players. And the feeling in the building was quite ominous, I would say. And like we did not feel safe. It felt very threatening. It felt very much like a group of people had come in to kind of take back or reclaim this league for themselves. And it was definitely not the normal crowd. And so yeah, that was our experience at the game. I tweeted about that, and that tweet kind of went viral, and the commissioner had to address what had been ongoing for the players in the league following that game, because it had finally reached this tipping point.
I'll tell you that the WNBA has players who are LGBT, lesbians, gay, bisexual, and trans. And this is unusual in professional sports to have players who are out. But there's an important part of this conversation that I wanted to address with Karleigh, is that transphobia is intersectional with racism, as we've seen in Connecticut with runners who are Black and teens who are targeted by white girls who say, oh, it's unfair to compete against trans athletes who just happen to be.
There's some transphobia in what we're seeing here, and what Frankie's talking about right now. I mean, one thing that is a constant is that it is easy to deny the womanhood and femininity of a Black woman or a woman. That is, I mean, that in many ways is the way white supremacy functions. That is a piece of it. Also, just to note, our facilitator of the conference today, Lindsay Pasquale, is a Sun season and their wife are Sun season ticket holders.
So they've seen this front.
So they saw this front and center, and they're right there with you on that. But what we're seeing in many ways in the WNBA this season is an offshoot of that. It's an offshoot of that. And one thing to point out, however, this is a certain group of fans that are doing this for a pointed reason. And unfortunately, Caitlin Clark is in the middle of it, undeservedly.
Well, it's up to her to stand up.
Well, that too. She does need to stand up to it and does need to speak on it. And that's also where some of the dragging, as it were, towards players like Dejanay Carrington, who actively spoke on it. The most improved player of the WNBA this year, plays for the Connecticut Sun, actually called it out and said, no, if these people are speaking for you, whether they actually speak for you or not, you have got to speak. You got to stand up front on it. And it's a fair charge.
I want to ask Sadie about what it's been like competing as the out trans sprinter you are. We've both written stories about how a lot of times competitors are being booed by adults, by grown-ups. Has that happened to you? And if so, what was it like? And if not, are you worried about that kind of activity when you're competing?
Yeah, so it has happened before. At indoor nationals especially, I was graded to my own like section of protesters in the stands, and they waited right at the finish line of the track. So once I had finished my 200 meters and I was exhausted, the place where they seat you, that's where all of them were. And it was something where like they all came with signs, they all insulted me when I got on my blocks, they all insulted me when I came off, and I had to walk through them to get back to my resting area where only the athletes can stay. And so I had to like pass by them and get insulted by them as I left. And that's pretty much a constant. at all my meets, even if it's not a group of people, there's going to be someone there recording me or someone there, taking photos of me to post online and criticize. So throughout my whole entire season last year, that was a constant.
Sadie, I want to counter that with the people here. Would everyone please give Sadie a round of applause for doing what she did?
Thank you.
A lot of the critics say, well, why don't you just have your own sports league or your own competition, just trans athletes competing? How would that work out for you, Sadie?
I think there's at most 40 trans athletes in the entire NCAA. There wouldn't even be, a league isn't even possible. There's
You'd be competing against yourself, basically, right?
pretty much, yeah.
So Frankie, explain to us as a journalist, this whole idea that it would be more fair to have trans athletes have their own, like Negro League.
Now, before we do that, Frankie, you got to give the Frankie De La Creta rule. You've got to give the rule.
Go ahead, go for it, Frankie.
Wait, what's the rule?
Fairness for whom?
Oh,
When
it's
people
true, right?
talk about fairness, every time I quote that, I quote you.
Well,
And I
thank
make
you.
sure your name gets there because you first brought this out. I believe it was an article, I think for The Nation a couple of years back, where you talked about, I'm not so concerned about fairness in regard to cisgender people, because when we talk about fairness, we have to ask fairness for whom?
And what Frankie
Yeah.
does is doesn't just write their Substack, but Sports Illustrated, The Nation, a lot of the mainstream media goes to Frankie to help them explain this issue. So Frankie, we have a wonderful opportunity here to hear this rule of yours, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, aside from the fact that it's incredibly othering to, try to put trans athletes into their own category or league, and there's just not enough, practically speaking, from a human rights standpoint, right? It just isn't the solution. And I think a lot of times we hear people argue that this is an issue of fairness when it's actually it's a human rights issue. And so when we talk about fairness, we need to be centering the most marginalized people in the room and what is fair for them. And in this case, it's transgender women and transgender athletes. And instead of being worried about what is fair for the trans athletes who have to face the discrimination and the harassment and the exclusionary policies just to try to play sports, we are overwhelmingly concerned with how these athletes feel about having to compete against a trans person. And those things are just they're not comparable at all.
I'd like to also
Sorry, I
invoke the
heard my
Karleigh
going.
rule. Karleigh, you've written a lot about Godzilla. What does Godzilla have to do with trans sports?
I call it the monster movie mentality because they talk about it's trans athletes versus women. It sounds like Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla to me. And that's another thing. Can we stop using the term trans athletes when we know we're talking about transgender women and transgender girls? That is too often I hear that. And I'll say that just take journalism, take everything off the table just as a human being. What you're doing is telling me I have to be demeaned to compete. That's what an open category tells me. I have to be demeaned to compete. I will never allow myself to be demeaned just to play a sport. But at another level, and even people who call themselves allies do this. When you're talking about transgender women and transgender girls competing with cisgender women and cisgender girls, let's say those words. Let's say those words. Let's actually say if we're gonna, don't use trans athletes as a mean to do a backdoor slider misgender. If you're gonna misgender me, throw the 101 hour Nolan Ryan special. If you're going to misgender me, don't do it under the table. Say it with your chest. But really, let's stop demeaning and misgendering, especially high school kids, especially the kids.
Yeah.
Because that's the one thing, because yes, for example, she is a woman in college, but Sadie Schreiner's young person.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have to deal with that.
Let's talk to Sadie about how do your parents support you? I'm hoping they do. And tell us what that looks like, because PFLAG is all about making sure families support their children in authenticity.
Yeah, it's definitely new for them. They're active supporters, but really the most that they do is coming to my important meets and like they at outdoor nationals carried a giant flag and waved it over the stadium whenever I ran and kind of tried to overwhelm the negativity with positivity.
That's awesome. And at what age did you come out, Sadie?
I came out my senior year of high school, so when I was 18.
Wow. Wow. How's it going?
Pretty good. Before I started competing as a trans athlete, I always said that transitioning was the easiest part of my life because it made everything simple for me. It's a bit more complicated now, but I still think that's true.
And Frankie, you mentioned before that you're raising a trans child, as am I. Are they old enough to compete or to participate in sports or be interested in sports? Is that something you would support?
I would support him, but he has no interest. I have I have an indoor child. My younger one is a sporty one and they are non-binary. And I would support them if they decided they wanted to compete, but no, my older one is very happy crafting.
How do we explain this idea that parents would boo children? I just can't get my mind around it. Like if I was at an arena and I was standing next to a parent who booed someone, I think they'd probably have to take me away and lock me up because I probably, slam them in the head with a punch.
But
I just
I
can't
think
imagine.
that sometimes I think about, those photos from when they were desegregating schools, right? And you have the white parents screaming at the black
Ugh.
children, right? It's like
It's the same
it's a
thing.
very similar situation. And I think what sometimes gets missed when we talk about this is that sports and trans inclusion in sports has been used by the right as this issue about protecting girls, right? We're talking about cis girls when we talk about who we're protecting here, again quotes around protecting, but it actually has been used to chip away at trans rights throughout our culture in a lot of other different ways. And what a lot of people don't realize is that this has been very, very strategically done, right? If you look back to like 2016 or so when the right wing was trying to pass those bathroom bills in like North Carolina, which would have banned people from using bathrooms that were not in line with like the gender they were assigned at birth, those bills largely failed. They did not work. And so what happened was all of these same groups that were trying to pass those bills turned to sports because sports is a very easy place to sound reasonable about this kind of discrimination and to make it be about fairness. And once those bills start to pass, you can see now we have locker room and bathroom bills back in place. We have bills to deny, youth trans affirming care, and now adults trans affirming care happen. Once you have made somebody a threat in one arena, it is easy to expand that threat into other arenas. And so sports, this isn't really about sports. This is about erasing trans people from public life. And it has started here. And it's a very easy thing to weaponize because we're talking about like bodies, and that is where it is easy to make people seem like a threat. But then that threat becomes expanded into the rest of public life, right? And so when I come back and say, this is a human rights issue, we can see how it's not just about, well, it's just sports, because it's really not. But even if it were just sports, I will say all of these discriminatory and exclusionary policies have been deemed human rights violations by the United Nations and Human Rights Watch. So again, right, we are really talking about who has a right to be, the Olympic Charter even says, right, like you have a right to participate in
Or
sports.
is human right?
Right? Like sport is a human right. And the impact is so much bigger than just sports because we can see them trying to legislate us out of existence.
And in one state, they've done it. In Ohio, just this year, HB 68 was a combo bill. They passed a sport ban and they passed a ban on gender affirming care as well. And there is audio of a group of Republican legislators in Ohio and Michigan who got together and basically had their own Von Z conference, where they basically admitted this is the plan and this is the next step of the plan. So if anyone out there is thinking that this is just a conspiracy, think again. They gave you the playbook and they're telling it to you in broad daylight.
We're about halfway through our panel, so I want everyone who has a question of the thousands of people who are gathered here, Just, please, look at those in the back, please. If you could, think of a question for our panel. We'll go to questions in a little bit, but first I want to ask Karleigh a question.
Sure.
You know, a lot of times you and I have written about coming out, stories about coming out. Outsports specializes in coming out stories. And a lot of times the comments are, why is this important? Why do we have to have stories about coming out? Do you have to answer that question about why it's still important at this stage in the world, 2024?
Because people are still asking that stupid freaking question. Because people are still asking that in 2024. Why it matters. They're still asking it. That's why it matters. But also it matters to that when Sadie Schreiner is doing what she do, taking that pain as a quarter miler and being a person who also ran the 400, I know how hard that race is. To see Sadie do what she does, also in the 200, which was my favorite event in high school, loved it. To see Sadie do what she did at Nationals back in May in South Carolina. That was huge for me just as a fellow athlete, but also you can bet that was huge for some 12 or 13-year-old trans girl wondering, do I have a place in the world, let alone a place in sports? That's why it matters. That's why telling the stories matter. And also I want to read something. Since we're in a group of parents here, it was at that point that my partner asked her, are you going to be racist for the entire game? Yes, I am quoting Frankie de la Cretaz excellent article on Anscape. When your partner faced that woman with the black face and the ridiculous nails, and by the way, on the broadcast, I saw that and the cameras pointed to that.
Oh, yeah.
That's what it takes. I wonder, we have people from New Hampshire here, right?
A couple hundred people.
We have some people from New Hampshire. I want you folks in New Hampshire. I want you to go to Plymouth Regional's next girls soccer game. I want you to go to Kearsarge. No, I'm probably not pronouncing it right. I want you to go to Kearsarge's next women's soccer game. I want you standing up for Parker Terrell, and I want you standing up for Mayo Jar. I want you there. And when parents are saying something stupid, I want you in their grill, please. I want you to do what Frankie's partner did. I want you to back up the parents of those kids, back up the teammates of those kids, back up that school district that said, no, Chris Sununu, this is unlawful, and we will face this when we will engage in this act of civil disobedience. I need you there. We need you there. At the fan level, that's where it starts. It starts by fans just getting in faces and saying, no, we're not having that. Not here.
All right, so start
Well, I
writing those
think-
questions down and pass them to
Well,
Lindsay. We'll pass them to me and I'll read them. I got a jump ball for Frankie and for Karleigh. CC Telfer. Why wasn't CC at the Olympics? Who's gonna take that one?
Well, I mean, I think that's complicated for a variety of reasons if we're talking about this particular Olympics. But I think that what Cece has faced over the course of her career has been, I was going to say hurdles, but that's a little too literal. People that do not know, Cece Telfer is an elite hurdler, and she Karleigh is no, yeah, she was
the first individual. She was the first individual trans student athlete to win an individual national title.
In the NCAA, right? Yep, NCAA.
NCAA, yeah.
To win the NCAA national title, 2019 at Division II in track and field.
So why not the Olympics?
Well, I mean, her goal has been the Olympics, right? After she won the national championship, she set her sight on the Olympics. And, the problem has been a lot of, red tape in every direction. And because, well, she runs track and field, which for folks that don't know, at the international level, World Athletics is the governing body for international track and field. They are and have been the most restrictive international federation in sports. A lot of these restrictive policies started with World Athletics. There's a great book actually called The Other Olympians that traces this all the way back to Nazi Germany. If you would like to read it, it's by Michael Waters. It came out this year. It's very, very good. But the point is that they have issued a outright ban on trans women competing in the women's division. And so even if CC had the resources and the support required to be able to, get to the Olympic trials and qualify. She could not compete because there's an international ban on her being able to.
And that in itself is an issue,
Right.
is that at one level, there were coaches that just didn't want to work with her just because, and this was before the ban was put in place. But that also dovetails into an issue that we really need to be talking about. The issues of women's sports have to do with access, they have to do with funding equity, they have to do with resource equity, they have to do with protections against people like predatory coaches, predatory team trainers, and the like.
Seen that.
And we've seen those things, but notice who's not talking about those. Riley Gaines is not going to talk about pay equity. In fact, she has spoken out against it.
You said that word, said Riley Gaines.
Yes, I did. Real American transphobe. Riley Gaines is there. Yes, I said it.
I was covering the NCAA swimming championships when Riley Gaines competed and tied Leah Thomas. And at that event, she was actually pretty cool about it. She was like, well, it is what it is. But then she realized, ding, ding, ching, I can make money off of this. And she's become a paid spokesperson for the alt-right anti-trans.
No, don't call them the alt-right. Call them what they are. It's the same old right. Let's just get rid of
White
it.
supremacy, yeah.
It's the same old right wing that
Yep, the
they've
right way.
always
Yep,
been.
they're awful.
But the whole thing, it goes back to in the case of like a CC Telfridge, he's had to deal with all with that, yet has kept her chin up.
Yep.
But as far as what happened at the Olympic trials, I did a sit down interview with her a few months back
You're a good
where she broke it down. And a lot of it was, again, the red tape that came out, because even if they don't put through the bans, they're trying to find ways to not let trans people compete. And the only way that you're really going to fight against that is when people like you, people like us, people like Frankie, people like Sadie tell her story, people like Frankie and I write that story, but also when individual parents, individual people at all levels, and especially at the scholastic level, because that's the foundation, that's where it starts. Speak out and say, we want to make sure every kid can have a right. No child shall be denied an equal educational access. That is in our public human rights law here in Connecticut.
Yep.
That no Connecticut school child shall be denied equal access to educational opportunity. Athletics is a part of that. That's the same in New Hampshire, it's the same in Maine, it's the same in every state in New England.
And in Connecticut, a child does not need to go through a medical transition to compete as their authentic self, which I think is wonderful. Let me ask Sadie a question before we go to these great questions we have here. Sadie, what is your goal? Do you hope that maybe these policies that Frankie was referring to will be overturned so that you could compete at a higher level after college?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, the goal is I reasonably have 8 years and I want to go to the Olympics. That's what the goal is. So we're gonna do everything we can to get there.
That's awesome. So let me ask the first question we have here. I'll throw this out to all of you, whoever wants to take it. How many trans youth in grades K through 12 are participating in team sports? I've heard different numbers. Anybody have an answer to that?
See, that's the tough thing. You really can't get an answer to that, but I can tell you this, based on the data that we've gotten from the states that have actually put that data forth. The estimates are there's maybe 1,500 transgender kids that are playing school sports in this country, and the vast majority of those are transgender boys. Then that's based strictly on the numbers that we've gotten at all levels. We're talking about we're talking about elementary school up, and that's the estimates based on the numbers we've gotten. At the high school level, we've gotten data in the last 3 years from like 19 states, and the average has been roughly four per state. And of those 4 per state, the majority are trans boys that are actually going through the processes that each state has them go through to certify that, yes, I'm trans, yes, I want to play a sport, this is how I walk through school, this is how I walk through life, etc. What you're really seeing here is people that are taking these isolated issues and blowing them way out of proportion, mainly because most people don't pay attention to a lot of what's going on. I mean, let's be honest about what sports we we actually pay attention to in this country. And what school? The only reason why people made a big to-do about Leah Thomas is because Leah Thomas is an NCAA Division I. Those are schools that you actually care about. She goes against schools like Florida, Alabama. Most people bring their college football into everything. No matter what the sport is, they go by what do people talk about during college football season? So you're talking about these big power 4 schools, and Leah Thomas is coming from the Ivy League going up against them and happened to win a national title. That's what got people's ire up. But most people think Katie Ledecky won the last British Bake Off challenge. They don't know this sport. So they really don't know what the parameters really are, and another level, what the rules really are.
Leah Thomas also lost. She didn't win everything she does. And that's what I've always said. My personal feeling is if trans athletes won every event they ever competed in, I would have to probably concede that maybe it's unfair, but they don't. Matter of fact, most trans athletes don't win.
And that's where I disagree with you. I see nothing wrong with the kid being good.
Oh, absolutely.
If Sadie Schreiner goes out next season for RIT and kicks massive amounts of backside up and down Division III,
Well,
and wins and finds a way and wins a national championship next year, and in fact that pulls a 2-4 double at nationals next year, should she be downgraded for that? No. Should she be given undue scrutiny for that? No. She should have the right to be good at what she does.
every parent wants to see their child succeed, but as a parent, you also want to teach your child how to be a good loser, or to just do your personal best. When I talked to the coach who coached CC Telfler to that championship, he said, we don't care about first, second, or third. We care about personal best. Did you do better than you ever did before? That's what really matters. Frankie, you were going to answer the question as well about how many kids there are in K-12 trans sports. What do you think?
Well, I was going to piggyback on what Karleigh is talking about, in that the majority of athletes that we do know about are trans boys, and there's a reason for that. And it's
Frankie,
because,
you wrote an excellent article about that a couple of years back.
yeah, I did, because I think that we don't really talk about, the trans boys when we talk about trans inclusion in sport. The reason for that is because they are not the target of these bills, and there's a lot of sexism and misogyny and like weird gender stuff tied into the fact that we don't see athletes who are assigned female at birth as a threat in any sport, whether it's women's sports because it's seen as like second class sports, or you allow trans boys to compete against the boys and nobody really sees them as a threat, which is messed up for a lot of reasons. But the impact of that is that there's a lot less restriction on those boys being able to play sports. Some of the bills that are being passed, they're like so uneducated in their hatred that they're supposed to be targeting trans women and girls, and they're trans girls specifically, because we're talking K through 12, right? And a lot of sometimes the text is so vague that trans boys get caught up in that, and then you have their parents are fighting this too. But I think the other thing that I was going to say is yes, this is a small number of athletes, but when Karleigh is talking about these vocal transphobic parents really at a lot of these events and these games and how important it is to counter that, I think it's also really important to say that that is a minority. The people that don't support trans kids is a minority, and they are a loud vocal minority, and they are so outnumbered that if even a small number of the people who do support trans kids showed up, they would be like just completely overrun because there are so few of them. It's just that they're really, really loud about it.
I want to ask Sadie a question before I get to the last question we have from our audience. Sadie, when it comes to your competing, what is harder? Is it the fellow athletes, or is it that fear that people have put in you by these booers and these other people? Which makes it harder to compete?
Yeah, I mean, there is some issue with other athletes in the division not supporting me and being actively against me, but I now have the added stress in my competitions of being assaulted, of being attacked when I go to these meets. And that's not by the other athletes, that's by the parents, and that's by the people attending who are just there because they don't like me. Like that's what their purpose is of being at the meet. They're just insulting me. They're just trying to make this harder for me.
And Frankie, I was amazed to see that trans non-binary running Nikki Hiltz, who just did compete at the Olympics, was labeled a man, and people were saying, well, she, which is the wrong pronoun, their pronouns are they, them, she's a man competing. And Nikki Hiltz was assigned female at birth. What do you think about that non-binary component of this hate?
Well, we're talking about, I mean, that's a whole other conversation because sports are organized in this very binary fashion, men's sports and women's sports. And as we know, there's a huge swath of people that don't fit into either one of those categories, whether they're non-binary or intersex athletes, who often are getting erased from this conversation, but who are impacted by a lot of these exclusionary policies as well. I think in the long term, what really needs to happen is we need to completely rethink how sports are organized at all, and really think about whether organizing sports by gender is the right way to be organizing it. And I don't know that we're ready as a society to have that conversation, but it's really the only thing that is going to change any of that. And I think the hatred that Nikki Hiltz experiences, in which they are calling Nikki, a man. And the thing is that Nikki has been very, very outspoken in the fact that they are foregoing any kind of medical transition in order to compete, in order to take their Olympic, and track career as far as they can. They've spoken about athletes often don't know what they're going to do when they retire, elite athletes, because it's their whole life has been their sport, and they're like, I'm going to take testosterone, right? And there's something really sad about having to really make that choice. This is the choice that we're making, but they're very clear that, about their transition status, and the fact that the people who hate them and hate us they don't actually even know what they hate. They're so uneducated that they're just throwing words at, trans people that don't even necessarily apply to them. And I think that just shows that the people who hate us don't even actually know who or what they're hating. We've become this sort of like boogeyman in their mind.
Exactly, the boogeyman. So this is for Frankie and also for Sadie. A question from the audience. This just in. Did transness factor into Division III versus Division I in terms of competition?
Is the question like, are there different policies depending on what division someone is in?
I think it's more a factor of how did that factor into a decision on where to go to school. So in a lot of cases,
yeah. And let's ask Sadie
how much Sadie, I'm going to direct this to you first, is because coming out of high school, you were fast enough to get some track scholarships. You have the numbers to do it, but how did transness factor into where you decided to matriculate?
Yeah. The truth is that honestly it didn't too much. When I decided where I was going to college, it was pretty much deciding between athletics or academics, and I chose academics at the time. And when I transitioned, I did it with the knowledge that I might not be able to compete. And so I chose transitioning over sports as a whole. And it's only been these past year that I've really been able to combat that. And I'm trying to take the step up because I've been doing track for 10 years now. It's probably the biggest part of my life as anything else has been. And I really want to succeed as much as possible in it. And so the difference between D3 and D1 is the competition you're running against. And now that I'm taking a more frontal approach to track, I'm actually trying to transfer into D1 to get higher competition and compete with higher quality athletes.
I like to say that being trans is the 5th most interesting thing about me. Would each of you tell me what's the most interesting thing about you besides being trans or non-binary? Karleigh?
You're gonna make me ask that first?
Yeah.
What's the most interesting thing is that right now is the fact that I'm in my early 50s and I put on full football armor and go out there and slam into other people. Yeah.
And I sit on my couch and watch.
You've been to a couple of my games.
I sit on the bench and watch.
And you probably wonder, have you lost your mind? And there are times
No.
when I wonder, have I lost my mind?
I just want you to
too?
get them safe because this girl big.
No, but the most interesting thing is I'm a journalist, even after moving forward, I'm a journalist, I'm still in sports and I still love sports. And in fact, the most interesting thing, and this has a little bit to do with trans, is that my love of sports has grown because of my process. It means more. Yes, because of my transition, competing in sport means more. It means even more to me because now for the first time in my life, when I hit that field or when I toe that starting line, I toe it as me. Not as a shell of me, not as someone wearing a mask, not as someone trying to hide, but now I am me out there. And when you're you out there, I mean, it's a lot easier to perform when you're not keeping a secret.
That's what always makes me laugh because people are like, well, Dawn put on a dress and a wig and Dawn is now dressing up as a woman. No, actually, that was the dressing up part before. I was dressing up as a man because I knew who I was since I was 4 years old.
But that in itself is another part of this whole issue is that people put that forward.
Yeah.
That people put that, there are people who truly believe, and I want to get everybody around the horn
Yeah.
talking about this. How do you answer to those? Because we got a question here. What would be a good?
Saving that.
Well,
I'm the moderator, so give me a second here.
I'm sorry. No, but I want to ask, how do you answer to the people who say? Don't you start.
Let these wonderful people answer the question I asked you. What's the most interesting thing about you, Sadie? Besides your identity?
Yeah, I'm a huge nerd. I play a lot of D&D. And I play video games, D&D, and I'm a big photographer. We just did a huge event here at RIT called a Big Shot, which essentially you take this giant building at nighttime and you illuminate it just with hundreds of people and flashlights. And it's a really cool project.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Frankie, what is the most interesting thing about you beside your identity?
Well, I mean, I was also gonna joke that, because testosterone clearly gives such a sporting advantage, I started taking testosterone to qualify for the Olympics. So you'll see me next year. Look out, I don't play a sport, but I'll dominate whatever one I choose. I am an amateur interior design enthusiast, and I, for fun, not only have designed my house, but I help my friends do theirs as well because
I love that. I'm learning new things. Also, we used to have a podcast together and we interviewed Frankie probably before you started on T. And your voice is doing great, man. I love it.
My kids listened to an interview that I had done because when my book came out, I wasn't on testosterone yet, and they didn't believe it was me, even though they also obviously knew me at that. They were like, "That's not you," and I was like, "No, I swear it is."
Same. I just put together a video celebrating my wedding anniversary of my late wife, and my kids wanted to hear their mom's voice, and some of the videos have my old voice, and they're like, "Who's that man?" So I'm saving this for last because I think this is a great question, and thank you for. Oh, there's another one. This just in. Okay, I'll save the next question, but we're gonna get this one. We have 8 minutes left. Do you think people are fearful that people who are presumed or assigned male at birth are in female sports because of past incidents, because of the media, because of a few bad apples? If so, what can we do to change that in terms of people who are assigned male at birth being in female sports? Let's add that to say female spaces. So let's go first with Sadie. Sadie, what do you do to handle or address the fear that people have of people like you and me and Karleigh being in female spaces?
Yeah, it's kind of coming from a place of demonization usually, and just falsities. A lot of times, like when I got reported on, they would add information in that wasn't actually there to kind of make the story seem more awful, which it was never true. None of that stuff's ever true. And what I found in a lot of these stories is that a lot of what people are saying are things that just haven't really happened. And I think that's where usually you have to start is proving that this isn't even an issue in the first place.
A short answer.
Do you think I think people are just fearful because they don't know. And I think that's the bulk of people, because it's easy to demonize people that most people do not know. That's how you get the monster movie mentality. Because once you start knowing people, then it's a whole different deal. If you choose to demonize that person, it's because you want to at that point, and that means you're a jerk and you don't want anything to do with you anyway. But I think the answer is that, for example, in my case, my answer to that question has always been, you're going to see me and I'm going to take up space. Whether it's at the starting line, whether it's at the mall, whether it's at the library, whether it's at your church, whether it's at the line of scrimmage, I'm going to take up space. I'm going to be there.
And you're gonna pee in the ladies' room behind a closed door where everyone should basically have their own
Well,
problems.
my thing is, why are people even caring? And see, that's another thing too. Just Karleigh Webb public service announcement. We of the transgender community would really like it if you cisgender people would stop speculating on people's genitalia. Not only is it rude, it's really kind of creepy.
It's really sick.
Oh my God, why are they so
Frankie.
obsessed with us?
Yes, they are. And Frankie, what can we do to address this fear of assigned male at birth people in female spaces and sports? Can we do anything?
I mean, I think the mainstream narrative has to change. The media has a responsibility. I think a lot of the focus on transgender women and girls is on their genitals, their bodies, their hormones, their chromosomes, and it's incredibly dehumanizing. What we have done is we've dehumanized the people, the real people at the center of these stories. I actually want to recommend for folks who are interested. I helped put together a package at Self Magazine last year. We actually just won a national journalism award for this. It's called Let Them Play, and it's an entire package on trans youth in sports, including guides for how to advocate for them in your community, talking points that if it comes up that you can counter a lot of misinformation with. There's guides for coaches and parents and things like that. And so it's at Self Magazine. It is called Let Them Play. And the entire premise was that we wanted to put together a package that didn't question whether trans youth should be playing sports, but the premise was that we know they should be, and here's how we can help them do that. And so I think there's a lot of good resources there for people as well.
Write that down. Google Self Magazine, Let Them Play. This is the last question in the 4 or 5 minutes we have left. And I'm going to ask Sadie first. Sadie for last. A question from our audience. What would be a good, quick elevator pitch when someone expresses disapproval for trans female athletes? Sadie, you're in an elevator and you're with somebody and they say, oh, trans athletes, trans women athletes.
It always seems to me to come from a place from misinformation or a lack of knowing what that looks like. And my elevator pitch is usually just asking them what that means. And then you
Put it on them.
Yeah. And then you can pretty much just they'll say something incorrectly and you'll have your way to just say this is what's actually happening, and that's not true.
Frankie?
I think if someone, expressed a fear of, trans girls or women athletes, I think my question is like, so what? What are you afraid of? What is it that you're afraid of? And when they answer, you just kind of keep saying, so what? Like, so what if that happens? So what if that happens? Because even the things that they're afraid of, it comes down to, right, like Karleigh was saying, like, okay, so they win? What's the problem? Or like someone might get injured. I'm like, it's sports. People get injured every time they step on a field, right? Like, I think so really just getting people to say what they mean, because sometimes, like Sadie is saying, they don't actually know. They're reiterating and regurgitating things that they've heard, things that actually, when you hammer them down, don't even really make sense. And so I think just kind of questioning and getting to the root of like, well, what are you actually saying? And would that be so bad, actually, if a trans person won? Why is that bad?
I would say, do you want to guarantee that only cisgender athletes can win? Is that what you're saying?
I love sorry, I was gonna say Chelsea Wolf, who for folks don't know, she's
Yes.
a
Yes.
BMX, she's a BMX athlete. She was the alternate at the Tokyo Olympics, for Team USA, and her sport cycling also banned, so she wasn't able to make it to the Olympics. And when I talked to her, she was like, people think these are the Olympics, but it's just the cis Olympics. It's a joke. And if you have to exclude me so that you can be the best in the world, then you're not the best in the world.
That's a piece of the attitude I take to it. In addition, I take a piece of what Frankie's talking about, what Sadie's talking about, that at one level, so I play, so what? At another level, you have a lot of information, I try and counter it, but at another point, I say, we need to go beyond trying to find bumper sticker answers to paragraph questions. At that point, I wanna, hey, would you like to talk to a trans person? Do you know a trans person who plays sports? And most likely that person's like, well, no. Well, you've just met one. Let's sit down, have some coffee, and let's talk about it. And let me walk you through what really goes on. Let me walk you through the rules of my sport if you don't know, for example. I'd be more than happy to do it. We need to be able to build the elevator pitch, but long term, we've got to we have to really step into these questions. And for a lot of people, it means stepping in while you're uncomfortable, because to me, I've said this a lot, and I'm sure if you follow me on any social media, if I'm on Twitter, you probably caught my Twitter, I say this. The real of this issue has nothing to do with sports, has nothing to do with fairness, it has nothing to do with the regulations. This really has to do with the fact that someone's uncomfortable. For example, that Sadie Schreiner was on that podium in South Carolina last spring, because people are uncomfortable with us just as human beings. And for a lot of people, that discomfort is because we don't know any trans people. So I would like to take the opportunity whenever possible for people to step in, and I'll start with that fact that me on that football field may make you uncomfortable. Let's talk about that. Let's step into that. Because conflict is opportunity. Conflict to me are beautiful things. They're actually blessings that can help us grow. So let's step into the discomfort. Let's step into the ugliness. Let's step into the muck, and let's actually have the conversations. And I think when most people have that, most human beings, not Riley Gaines, want to actually have those discussions. So I encourage people, if you're uncomfortable, great, let's step into it. Let's talk about it.
And if you don't, just say what Frankie said. So
Oh,
what? So what? I'm gonna leave you with this thought. It's a meme I created a couple of years ago during the bathroom bills in North Carolina. It's something I did with Scott Turner Schofeld, who's a trans man actor. You've already peed next to a trans person and you were fine. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Art. Thank you, everyone. Yes, I'm a diva. All right, guys. Thank you again. Thanks for taking part. Bye-bye.
Frankie, it's good. Frankie, we got to actually meet in person.